Welcome back, folks, to the next chapter in Aging Now What? I'm your co-host, Jessica Branning with ClinCloud Clinical Trials, and I have with me here...
I'm Ignacio, president of North Star Senior Advisors.
And he's also the co-host as well of this lovely podcast. I'm super excited to have him actually talk about his topics here today, all about North Star Senior Advisors. And we're going to dive into when is the right time for a transition into assisting living facility, and what should we consider or factor into those decisions. So first question right off the bat is, when is the right time to move into a senior living community?
Yeah, so great question. And it's something we get asked a lot. And I would say it's a combination of a subjective answer and objective. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what I usually tell folks and families is keep in mind, of course, safety is always going to be number one. If you can age in place at home safely, then do so. And if you have the resources, that's going to be number two. So it's going to be safety and resources. Safety, of course, will be if you get to the point, or your loved one gets to the point where they're high risk for falls, or falls are happening. Nutrition is going to be another thing. Social isolation is another big one. So those things are items you want to consider in terms of time for a transition. It's going to be hard. It's always going to be hard to give up the independence of being at home and accepting that timing of that transition. So we understand that, but that's going to be the two major things are going to be, of course, safety and then resources. And let me go into resources a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to know that.
So when I say resources is you can also stay at home if you do need assistance and you have some of these items that I mentioned in terms of being at risk for falls or nutrition with home health. Mm-hmm. The issue with that is that over time, home health can become pricey because it is on an hourly basis, and as that accumulates over time, that will add up significantly. So again, if you can do so safely and you have the resources to do so.
Perfect. So one of the things that comes up a lot of the times when people are considering, placement is this term called continuum of care. What exactly is that?
So continuum of care, if you look at it from like start to finish, right? Mm-hmm. So of course you would be typically starting at home. So if you're starting at home, there are resources you can get at home to support you through this process. So let me just go through those really quick. They could be things like Medicare home health. When I say Medicare home health, that's how that home health is paid for, usually through your Medicare benefit. And it's usually skilled services that will come to the home, such as nursing, occupational therapy, physical therapy, a social worker, things like that. And that usually will occur after something has happened for the senior or the individual, mm-hmm. To help them recover short term, okay? It has to be ordered by the physician. So that's that particular resource at home. There's also private duty home mm-hmm. health. That's gonna be when Medicare doesn't cover it anymore and you still need assistance. It's unskilled. So what that means is you will not get that registered nurse, that physical therapist. You'll get a caregiver, if you would, to come to the home, help you with transitioning, maybe from bed to the bathroom, mm-hmm. Things like that. Bedside companionship, those types of things you can get at home. So there's that setting in the continuum of care. Typically the next one will be independent living. Mm-hmm. So when that comes up, is going to be if you're looking to downsize. If you're downsizing, usually it's going to be social isolation. You want to be out of the home. There's not a lot going on. Mm-hmm. You want to be in a community that will offer meals, activities, things like that. So think of it as like a 55 plus type community. So independent living will be typically traditionally the next phase, if you would. After that will be, of course, assisted living. So assisted living, very similar to the 55 plus / independent living. You'll have a room, you can share a room, you can have a private room, there's amenities, there's food, mm-hmm. activities. Difference between independent and assisted is going to be care. Okay. So in the assisted living, you will receive the care that you may need, such as medication management, help with activities of daily living, things like that. And depending on the assisted living, you may have nursing staff to help you with that as well. the next progression, if we're going into, let's say, memory, Alzheimer's and dementia, there is the next step would be a memory care community where they specialize in Alzheimer's and dementia, okay? So that could be potentially the next progression. Beyond that is going to be skilled nursing. So that's going to be the nursing home. That's going to be for folks that are either short-term or long-term. That's going to be for folks on the short-term side of things. For example, if somebody's had a total knee replacement, maybe a fall, something like that, they go to the hospital, maybe surgery, then they go to rehab or nursing home short-term to recover, typically 20, 30-something days, and they're discharged either back home, or if the assisted living is home, they'll go back to the assisted living. In the nursing home, there's also long-term care.
Okay.
So these are going to be folks that are they require a higher level of care beyond what an assisted living can provide, okay, because that is regulated. So that could be potentially the next step, if you would. Also, end of life, if they're gotten to that point and they need that much attention and care, long-term care at a nursing home may be the answer. So that's typically going to be your continuum of care. If you look at it from start to finish, it could be pretty wide-ranging, and folks can jump around. It doesn't always have to be the natural progression. There's things may happen that they may go from home all the way to assisted, or home all the way to memory, sometimes home, nursing home, things like that.
Okay, great. That's good information. So staying at home versus assisted living, if you will. I mean, I know the majority of people are like, it's my home, I want to be here. But as you were kind of talking about before, I mean, there's safety and resources. So what are kind of the pros and cons between the two settings, if you will?
Yeah, so the pro for staying at home is going to be, again, you're in your environment, okay? And as I mentioned in the beginning, if you can do so safely and you have the resources, perfect. Do so as long as you can, okay? I would do the same thing, okay? The potential cons of staying at home is when, that's not necessarily the case, okay? So for example, biggest thing is going to be, of course, safety. If we take away, if we're not even talking dementia and Alzheimer's, we're just talking traditional needing help with items, the biggest thing that we've noticed is going to be the risk for falls. So if there is a history of falls, or falls are starting to occur, and there's nobody at home, let's say, for your loved one, for your mom or dad, that's a concern, right? So that's going to be a potential con of staying at home, is that because it only takes one bad fall, unfortunately, for things to not go too well from there. The other item is going to be nutrition. That's another big thing. Is we notice this a lot, and we notice it a lot through COVID as well, is that without the proper resources, nutrition can play a pretty big role. It can affect blood pressure, hydration. So there's a lot of things to factor into proper nutrition. Social isolation is another big one. It could potentially be a con in staying at home. Again, we saw this even more so through COVID, and where folks were engaging with local churches and friends, that social isolation really spiked, and that can lead to depression, anxiety, and other things. So that's kind of that. And the assisted living, some of the pros in going into an assisted living is going to be that a lot of that is addressed, of course. So you get to that point where once you make that transition, nutrition will definitely be addressed. All these communities are regulated and monitored by the state, and nutritional information is posted monthly. So that's a plus. And a lot of the food is actually pretty good in these communities.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah. A lot of them brag about, hiring chefs. They get chefs from Disney. We're here in Central Florida. So things like that are really attractive. And, if it's like me, I love to eat. So, it doesn't hurt to have good food, which is very important. And again, the safety. So there's somebody always there. Okay. So even though you're in the assisted living, you have your own independence, you have your own room, your own space. Again, biggest difference is that somebody's either going to be there working with you directly if you need the help, or at a minimum, they're on standby to do so if you were to need the help. So that's going to be, pretty important. And then, of course, there's the engagement side of things. So if your loved one was at home and they can kind of spiral downward a little bit if they're not meeting their needs socially. So in the assisted living, activities are happening daily, various activities. So that's something that can engage isolation that might have been there before, help deal with depression, anxiety. They'll make friends. So, those are going to be the good things to look for in an assisted living in that transition.
Would you say too, as you're considering, maybe staying at home versus going into assisted living, if you stay at home too long, that transition, when you were referring to like the continuum of care, you could go from home into maybe skilled nursing quicker than if you would have had that assisted living, right? Because of all of the pros that kind of would come into play from that standpoint?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So there is such a thing as a window of opportunity, is what I call it, to take advantage of an assisted living community. There is a criteria in which you can be accepted into an assisted living. And I'll mention it really quick. You have to be able to stand up, pivot with assistance, at least one person, sometimes maybe two people assisting you in doing that. You can't have any wounds. You can't have any communicable diseases. But the biggest thing is always going to be having the ability to getting in and out of bed with assistance. What will happen potentially is and we've seen this happen a lot, folks wait a little too long, and then that window of opportunity narrows down and or closes. And then what will happen is that option to go into an assisted living, or even a memory care for that matter, is gone.
Got it.
Then you're not appropriate anymore for that setting, so then the only option is a nursing home.
Got it. So what are the costs between the two? So staying at home versus going into assisted living?
Yeah, so if you stay at home, if you have that resource, that financial resource to do so, the average cost in today's world for private duty home health, if you're needing that assistance, is about $27 an hour, okay? Most companies will require you to have a minimum in terms of how much time is spent on a weekly basis, and we can make some recommendations. We work really closely with some really good companies here in Central Florida. The issue with that is, of course, it can add up, right? So if you get to the point where your loved one needs 12 hours, maybe even 24-hour care around the clock, now you're looking at maybe $8,000, maybe $10,000, $12,000 a month just to have somebody at the home. So again, that's around that cost. The average cost for assisted living is around $3,500 starting out, and of course that will probably be without care.
Okay.
We can help find some more affordable options, but it's becoming tougher in today's world, to be honest with you, with the increased cost of care that we're seeing and food costs. That's of course translated over to these communities, so they've increased their prices here recently. But care is going to be the other item to consider when you're looking into the cost of assisted living. So you'll have your base rent, amenities, food, activities, that's included in the base rent, and it can go up from there, of course. And then care costs will range anywhere from about $300 starting out up to maybe about $1,800 on top of the room rate.
Got it.
So that's about the average cost for that. If we're talking memory care, if it's Alzheimer's and dementia type of scenario where they need to be secured or need that specialized environment for those with advanced dementia and Alzheimer's, that's starting out at about $4,400 a month.
Got it.
Okay. And the biggest difference between the assisted living and memory care is that normally, I would say 99% of the time, the care is included in those communities that offer Alzheimer's, dementia, memory care.
Great. Okay.
Yes.
That's great. That's wonderful. It's good news for all of our lovely folks. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of talk about financials, right? I mean, this is costly. So are there programs that can help facilitate for maybe some individuals that don't have that financial resource to cover some of these costs?
Yes, there's three things that can potentially help pay for assisted living or memory care. Number one is going to be if they've invested in what's called a long-term care insurance policy. Those are a little rare. Not everybody has had the ability to do that. For those that have, there's a daily rate that's reimbursed for either nursing home or assisted living. I've seen a range anywhere from $50 as high as $400 a day.
Oh, wow.
So that can be a tremendous resource. That's probably going to be one of the only resources, depending on the policy, that can help pay for the entire cost. Okay. The second thing is there's this benefit for veterans. It's called the aid in attendance. It's like a pension for veterans, and that can be either for the veteran themselves or the spouse or the widow of a spouse, and that's a specific criteria that the VA has set. So you have to apply through the VA. But the benefit to that is that it's like a pension. So once you get approved, you pretty much have it as long as you're in that environment and you're needing the care. It's also the only benefit that's retro paid, which is really nice.
Okay.
So what that means is if you get into an assisted living, let's say this month, and you apply for the VA benefit pension plan and you get it, let's say it takes 4 months for you to get it, the VA will retro pay that amount in a lump sum.
Oh, that's nice.
So that is very nice. So that'll help some families out that are having to maybe come out of savings, things like that. So that's number 2, the VA. The third and final thing is going to be, it's called the Medicaid Long-Term Care Program. It has a couple different names, diversion program. It's a Florida-specific Medicaid plan. It's not your traditional healthcare Medicaid. That's important to note.
Okay.
Because some folks have Medicare, Medicaid, right? So no, this is a different Medicaid. It's a Florida. If we're in Florida, it's a Florida program, and it's going to be based on a couple of things. The level of care that individual will need will be factored in, and then their income and assets.
Got it.
Okay. It's more of a low-income program. Okay. And that can be applied for. There's some ways to apply for it. We have some resources here locally we can help guide families to send them to where they can apply at no cost. And that Medicaid benefit can take anywhere, I've seen it, maybe 5 to 6 months, if not sometimes a year or so to get approved.
Got it.
So what we do is when we have families give us a call and we do our exploration through the conversation and that initial assessment, we'll figure out if they qualify for any of those things, and then we'll kind of guide them on how they can apply for those benefits. But those are, unfortunately, the only 3 things. Outside of that, it's privately paid.
Got it. Okay. That's good information. That's a good breakdown. So when you are, maybe it's that time, I'm transitioning out of my home and I've decided assisted living is really something that I have to explore. What are some of those factors that, for me, maybe I'm trying to put my mom and dad into assisted living. What should I help guide them or listen to them, when considering a facility? Yeah.
So I would say number 1 is reach out to either us or somebody like us. And I would recommend a boutique approach. Somebody, again, that has boots on the ground, that has a good pulse in the community, has been working with these communities, and they understand what's going on. Because you don't have to do it alone, because it can be pretty overwhelming in terms of what you need to factor in for a proper placement. So things to look for in a proper placement will include, I would say number 1 is going to be the level of care that your loved one, or if you're looking for yourself, that you're going to need. It's important to factor that in today's world and what that's going to look like in the future, because as the care needs progress, these communities, assisted living memory care communities, there's 4 license types in Central Florida and in all of Florida, really. So you have to factor that in. If you don't, and you select a community that can't accommodate what you're going to need in the future, you'll get a 45-day notice, and then you have to either go to a nursing home or you have to go into a community that has a different license type. So it's very important to look at care. Budget's going to be the other thing, right? So what you don't want to do is going in on your max budget. These communities will typically assess a year-over-year increase, and that can range anywhere from 2 to 6%. Wow. So it's important to know that. So you want to look for something that's going to be within your budget, of course. I would say culture is another big deal. These communities, they're great, but they all have kind of like their own little culture to them. So that's something that we would know and help guide families through as well. And I would say the other thing is going to be geography. To some families, it's very important for the community to be, 10 minutes away, down the street, because they're going to be planning on going daily to go see mom or dad, potentially. If that's not the case, and let's say the number 1 driver is, let's say, budget, then they may be more flexible in having something with like maybe a 20-30 minute radius.
Got it.
Okay, so what we do through our approach is we figure all that out through a consultation. We'll figure out care, budget, geography, culture, and then we'll pull those options and share them with the families so they can make a sound decision. And then, of course, we take them on tours in those communities as well. So those are going to be the 4 major things you want to look into when selecting a community.
And is there a cost to the consultation that you offer?
No. So our services on the placement side of things that we do is 100% free to seniors and families. It's a great resource. People will say, well, how do you get paid, right? So we are paid a marketing fee by the community they select.
Got it.
Okay, and this is an industry standard. Another question we get asked is like, well, if we work with you, are we going to pay more on the community that we select? The answer is no. You would pay the exact same cost going into a community if you would do it alone versus us. There's no cost translated over to the client in any shape or form. So we're completely complimentary on that end. We can provide all this information, and then we also understand that it's not always going to be an immediate move. I will say the majority is an immediate move, but every now and then it's not an immediate move. So if anything, just what I've shared here really quick, it's a ton of information for families to think about, factor in, so when the time comes, they're ready.
Yeah. So it's probably better to start these conversations sooner rather than later.
I highly recommend it, yes.
Yeah. Now, I know a lot of the times people say, I'm going into an assisted living and it immediately includes memory care. But is that the case? Do all assisted living facilities actually have a memory care facility that's linked to it or area that's linked to it?
Yeah, really good question. The answer is no. Not all of them will have a memory care support element to the assisted living. So you'll have a variety of options. You'll have communities that offer actually a little bit of everything. They'll have independent living, assisted living, and memory care, all within the same property, if you would, or the same entity, okay? You'll have also assisted livings that's all they do and that's all they offer. And they don't have the ability to accommodate folks with advanced dementia and Alzheimer's. So the answer would be no for those independent assisted livings. There's also standalone memory care communities, so that don't do assisted living, and all they focus on is just memory care, and that's what they specialize in. So the answer is not all assisted livings will have memory care support. What we like to do through our consultation, our process, and as we try to also do an assessment, a clinical assessment. There may be a dementia diagnosis, and it's important to know and understand in what stage that individual is in, because if it's more like if it's extremely early staged, okay, and they're not elopement risk and they don't need that high focus of care with memory support, they can still benefit from the assisted living. So then what potentially could happen is they would go into an assisted living that has memory support. So then they can take advantage of the assisted living, could be for months, years, and then when the time comes, because as we know, dementia, Alzheimer's is progressive, then they can easily transition into that memory care piece. We do get clients that they're beyond the assisted living and they have to go into the memory care, and we can do that as well. And that can be either an assisted living that happens to have memory or a standalone memory care community.
Yeah, because I guess sometimes it could be that you're dealing with a couple, right? That one might need assistant, one might need memory, so you can kind of place both individuals?
Yes.
Is that some of the stuff that you do as well?
Yes,
okay.
It happens pretty frequently. And you kind of hit the nail on the head. Typically, it's going to be a variation in care level when you have a husband and wife typically, and yes, we could do that, and that would make perfect sense if that's what needs to happen. Is one of the spouses would be in the AL, and then literally around the corner, a couple steps away, the other spouse would be there getting that memory support.
That's great, and they can visit each other, and typically, that's good. That's good. Now, when you're considering going into a facility, are there long-term contracts as well that you have to understand and sign up for, if you will, or is it more of a month-to-month? What's kind of the contract like?
So for assisted living and memory care community options, there is no long-term care. No long-term contracts.
Okay.
In Florida, it's month to month.
Okay.
Okay, so you will sign, you will take financial responsibility, you'll sign their agreement, but that is a month-to-month agreement in the state of Florida. So what that means is if you make a selection and let's say, a year goes by, 2 years goes by, and you want to bring your loved one back home for whatever reason. Hopefully you can do so safely, right?
Yeah.
Or you want to potentially move them to another community, or you want to take them out of state, whatever it may be. All you have to do is give a 30-day notice.
Okay.
Written notice, and that's pretty much it. You can walk away from that community. So no, there is no long-term obligation like an apartment complex.
Okay.
There's like a 12-month lease or something like that. It doesn't exist in this space.
That's great. That's really good. Yeah. So how about, what are some additional resources? I know we talked a lot about it, but are there any additional resources to consider when you are transitioning into an assisted living, or maybe even out of an assisted living?
Yeah, no. So yes, there's plenty of things to consider depending on the situation as you're transitioning. If you're looking, of course, to sell your home, to maybe use some of those funds to help pay for the assisted living. Of course, a real estate agent, movers will be another thing, and of course these are all things that we can refer folks to. Typically real estate, everybody knows somebody that's a real estate agent, but so that's kind of important. And movers, I'll say this, the majority of the assisted living communities and or memory care communities are unfurnished, so that's important to know. So they will need their own furnishings, so they can either bring small items from home. Some families will buy a few items because it's really not a whole lot that's needed because it's a downsizing scenario. Beyond the physical stuff, there is an emotional element to the transition. Okay, so there are resources and companies that we work with that are either a nonprofit or will work with their insurance to help support those, again, with Alzheimer's and dementia specifically, upon that transitional process, educating on what's to come, what to expect. There's also companies that help with mental health if there's typically depression already in place, anxiety, and we'll see this a lot when there's a husband and wife scenario. It is an emotional time. This is not typically something that's been planned for. This is usually something that either a spouse or a family member has to do because it's the right thing to do for the loved one. So it's not easy. So there's a lot of emotion, a lot of anxiety. So we'll refer to companies that will go through their insurance and can provide counseling services upon that transition to kind of mitigate some of that anxiety. So that's also important to know. So you're not alone. And again, we can guide folks through that process as well.
That's amazing. I mean, what an incredible amount of knowledge I just obtained myself. So watch out, Mom and Dad. I know what to do now. Well, how can everybody get in touch with your organization?
Yeah, so you can call us, 407-796-1582. You can email us, info@northstarsa.com. Visit our website. We have a pretty good website. There's a lot of educational content on our website, and that's www.northstarsa.com. And we'd love to assist. There's no commitment. It's complimentary. If anything, you get a bunch of information. So,
and knowledge is power.
It is.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining in, and thank you, Ignacio, for giving us all that information. It's great.
Thank you, Jessica. My pleasure.